In this video, we'll be looking at how to cut out and isolate images from their backgrounds. So in this case, we'll take this anemone on the left-hand side and hone in on that. It's always a good idea to copy the photograph you're working from and have it as a duplicate layer just in case anything goes wrong, or it's also a useful fallback. So first of all, I will rasterize this layer. It's actually already rasterized, so that's fine. Rasterizing means, of course, I can edit it. I'm then going to give it a name, anemone. So I've typed that in there. And I'm then going to right-click over an anemone, duplicate layer, OK that, and we have a copy to work from. So in fact, I'll work on the copy and switch off the underlying original. Now, let's look at this plant itself. For the sake of this video, there are numerous ways of cutting out and isolating plants, but we'll use the pen tool. It's not really a pen. It's got a pen symbol, but really it's a cutout tool. It's just been rather strangely named. So let's use the navigator. And just remember how to find the navigator. We go to Window and go down to Navigator, and that brings up this little window that massively helps in terms of navigating around the photograph and not getting lost. So we're going to zoom in and fill the screen with this flower. Now, that's the one we're going to be working on. What I'm going to do is select the pen tool and move around, giving myself various anchor points with this pen tool. If I tap there, that's given me an anchor point. And if I tap there, it's given me another anchor point. At the moment, I'm just looking at particularly obvious places to anchor this line and not worrying about the curves, because that's going to come later. But I'm giving myself anchor points to work from. All will become clear in a moment. So what we do is we go right the way around until we've actually closed off this entire space. So that's completely closed right the way around. Now, it takes a little bit of practice, but this straight line between these points, these what are called vector lines between these points, can now be adjusted and curved as follows. Let's move in a little bit. It's just difficult to find the exact point where you want to be. You can move this little square in the navigator. And let's just work on this line between these points. Now what I'm going to do, now that I can see that I need to curve here and then curve again, is give myself another anchor point here. You see the pen has a little cross on it at this point. I then press down Control, and that gives me an arrow. And this arrow means that I can then pull that line down to here. You notice the line is actually curved. There's an anchor point here, which I can move just to there. And then I can put over here another anchor point. I can press Control, and I can stretch this curve to there. And you see these little toggle points? I can stretch that, and I can move that curve. You see the curve moves as an S. Now, this takes practice, understanding what these lines do. You can pull them and stretch them, but they will curve to any shape. Between these anchor points, I have an anchor point here, and I have an anchor point here. I can then put another anchor point here, press Control, and stretch this curve up to this line here. And you notice that's actually an unnecessary one, so I can just step back, undo that path component. Put another one here, and stretch that line. And you notice that this curved line now follows the curve of the petal. Now, plants, of course, being organic shapes, do take time. There are quicker ways of doing this, but this is one of the most accurate ways of producing smooth curves that follow exactly the contours that you want them to cover. I'll just do it again at this point. I'll put an anchor point here, and because that's fairly straight there, we can adjust it a little bit later. An anchor point here, and then stretch this curve here into that dent. We've now got an anchor point there and an anchor point there, and I can put another anchor point here, press Control and pull this line into that shape there. I can stretch this one in exactly the same way. And so we work around. Now I'm being particularly detailed on this petal. One can, of course, be far simpler. I'll put an anchor point there and then stretch it out to here. Because what one could do, of course, is then later come back into this and use the rubber tool for taking out those sections there. But I'm wanting just to demonstrate at the moment how to use these anchor points. So keep on working around, and let's have another one there, and we'll pull that out there. Now, if we hone out a little bit, if we just move out rather, you can see that here we have a cutout line that follows the curve of this petal. And I carry on working around. I'm going to carry on working around now and then come back to this in just a moment. So you'll notice that I've now been around the complete flower, and you can see all the little anchor points anchored all the way around the petals, right the way around. And it's joined up at the end and closed everything. So now it's a closed selection. I need to select it. So I right click and it says make a selection, and we'll have feather radius of, let's say, 1 pixel to slightly soften the edges of this selection. Okay. And so you've got the little scurrying ants going all the way around the petals, and you can see it follows it around really pretty accurately. And we can always edit this later. But I'm now going to inverse the selection, so I get rid of everything apart from the flower, and we select and we inverse and we Control X, and that's taken the flower to that stage. So that's isolated that flower at a single click. Now, of course, we can now go into the detail on this and just tidy it up a little bit. And I would use the rubber tool for that. You select your rubber, and we're using a nice soft rubber there, and you can just tickle the edges just a little bit where it's picked up perhaps a little bit too much of the black background, and we just want that to be a little bit softer around the edges, soft around the edges, and soft around the edges. Now, and so you work around that until you're completely happy with the image, which is actually looking pretty good. There's a little bit in the corner here, which I think we can work at, where we just soften that here, and we soften that there, and soften that. Now, of course, although that took time, what that does mean is one now has a permanent file of an anemone flower, which one can, of course, replicate any number of times. You can copy that. And interestingly, actually, it's still picked up that. Now we've moved it across, so you might have to tidy this up a little bit more. If we move out, let's just cut that bit of unwanted foliage from the background, there. And you can see that we've now got this flower, which in fact has got these bits of foliage in it. We'll just make it a little bit smaller. We can cut it down like that and tidy up the whole image, because of course we've got the rest of the photograph still sitting there, which is not what we want. So we can cut this out, and cut this out, and cut this out like that. So you can, and then of course using the navigator we can move in on that, and this now is a fully tidied up flower, and we can go on copying it. And as we copy it, we could build up an image of anemones. This is actually probably the cleanest way of cutting out individual flowers with relatively simple shapes, using the pen tool as the cutout.